Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome back for another card video. For today's card, I'm using this Blossom Builder Punch by Stampin' Up. It has a bunch of leaves and petals in it. And what I'm going to do is take some vellum. This is Simon Says Stamp vellum. And I'm just going to punch this a bunch of times to get several petals for 3 different size flowers. So I'm actually using the 2 petals here for 2 different flowers, and then that leaf punch for another flower for the smallest one. So I've got them all stacked up here on a piece of folded printer paper, and I'm going to use some tape runner just to have a place to stick my petals so that I don't have to touch them while I color them. What I'm going to do is take Copic markers, and this one is R37, and I'm just going to kind of go up and down. You can see how it gets darker the more color I put on. And then once I have enough color, I'm flipping it over. I'm using the chisel tip side, by the way, to the kind of thinner side and streaking it up. So I'm going to do another one here, and so you can see I'll take the flat edge and just go up and down using a vertical motion. It popped off, so I'm just going to put it back on here. So you have to do it kind of slowly. I was trying to make it quick. So I'm just going to go over this, and notice I'm always going up and down in a vertical motion. And once I have that all covered, then I can flip my pen over, and now I'm using kind of the thin line to draw thinner lines, and it creates this textured flower petal like with the veins in it. It's a really cool look. It really only takes about 10 or 15 seconds to dry, and then you can touch it. You won't get it on your fingers. It just dries completely. You can see how beautiful this is as I take it off and show it to you. I'm going to grab this other one as well. It's kind of hard to see when it's on the paper, but you can see how you get that streaky look, and it makes it look very realistic for a flower. So I'm going to continue on with this. I'm going to do 2 at a time just to make it go a little faster. And I'm going to do 10 of these, which is going to make 2 5-petal flowers. So you can see on this one, I'm putting a couple of layers on here with the dark color. And then you can wait till it dries if you have a really juicy marker, and that kind of works better. And I'll show you that in my next color. Or you can, while it's still wet, like I'm doing with this one, color over it with the thin line. So this is R22, and it's a very juicy marker. So you can see I'm not doing very many layers. And then I'm going to let it dry. And after it's completely dry, now I'm going to add those thin lines. And you can see as I go over it that the marker color sort of spreads out a little bit. So you kind of want to wait a second to see what the results are before you add too much color. Now for these, I'm going to go back to that first color I used, the R37, and just flick a little bit at the bottom upward. And you want to do just a little bit of color because you don't want to react with that R22 that's underneath, and then they'll start to spread out and it won't look good. So I did this little flicking motion at the bottom of each one of these R22. My third flower color is yellow. I'm using Y15, and my marker is pretty juicy for this one too. So you can see I'm just using a couple of swipes to cover the whole thing, and then I'm going to wait till it dries and then add some of these thinner stripes going upward. And I'm doing 3 at a time on these. You can see as I pull it off here. It's kind of hard to tell on the yellow, but you can definitely see some texture there. Now for these, I'm going to take the R22 and start at the bottom and flick upward. Again, just a few very light-handed strokes. All right, now I've got all of those colored. I'm going to arrange them on my cardstock. This is A2 size, so 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm going to start with the largest. So I have 2 large flowers, and I'm just sort of arranging them here. This is not going to be permanent. I'm just kind of figure out where my stems are going to be. So you can see I added 2 of the mediums, then I added 1 of the small, added the last medium, and I'm kind of arranging them as I go to make sure that they're kind of spaced out correctly. I don't want them too overlapping, but then I don't want too much white space in between. It's not an exact science, and it is a little tricky to kind of get these placed with so many pieces, and I'm not using any adhesive yet, but I just want to make sure I know where they're going to go. So once I figure out where they're going to be laid, I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to mark the center of each one of these. So I'm going to move the petals out of the way slightly so that I can make a little pencil mark in the center. And I'm going to do that on each one of these petals. And that one actually moved off the cardstock. So once I have my marks, I'm going to move all of the flower petals out of the way and draw my stems. And I'm going to hand draw these. If you have a stamp, you can certainly stamp them. But I thought it'd be just as easy to do this. And plus I could make the stems irregular for flowers that are sort of in line vertically. Like this one right here is right on top of the other one, so I angled it down a little bit once I was going toward the bottom. If you're too afraid to do this, you can of course always do it with a pencil and then go over it with the marker. I am using multi-medium matte to adhere these vellum petals. I squeezed out a big circle of glue, and now I'm going to arrange my petals, and then I'm going to add glue as needed. So you can see I kind of covered the circle I made, so I'm just going to go back in and add a little bit more glue. And I just want my petals to hit, the bottom of each petal should hit each other in kind of like a center area. So now I'm going to add another one, but I need more glue. This glue is great because it stays wet for a while, so you have some time to wiggle your petals around to make sure they're perfectly placed. But when it dries, it's going to dry matte, so you won't have that glossy finish that looks like you have glue. So you can feel free to use as much glue as you want to get these petals down, but I'm really focusing on having glue just in the center, and honestly, it's completely enough for these petals. You'll be surprised how well they stick. So once I have all 5 of them on, I'm looking at the overlapping areas to make sure that they're all even. And so I'm just gonna let that dry and I'll work on my next one. But as I'm working on my next one, I'm watching that first one because the vellum is going to curl a little bit from the moisture of the glue, which is actually good in a way because it kind of curls the petals a little bit, makes them look a little more realistic. But what I want to do is press it down in the center. So I'm going to press it down as it starts to dry a little bit, and I'll reposition those petals and stick them in the very center. All right, moving on to the next petal. Again, squeezing some. I'm going to fast forward here. And you can see that I've got some of these petals hanging off the side of the cardstock, which is fine. I'm going to trim that off later. So now I'm watching this and I'm seeing that my pinks are starting to curl, the light pinks. So what I'm going to do is, so that I don't get too much glue on my fingers, I can take a piece of vellum, this is just a scrap piece, and I'm going to put it on top of my flower and then press it. And you can see the glue kind of spread out a little bit. I could just kind of rub whatever's excess off, but it's not going to show because it'll dry matte and you won't even notice it. So I'm just going to go through here and finish all of these flowers, and you can see that you could put them right on top of each other and the glue will still stick and they'll still look really pretty. So you do want them kind of overlapping a little bit because then it looks like it's a bunch of flowers. This is my final flower, so I am going to let this dry completely. I'm going to add a sentiment from the More Sketchy Banner Greetings by Simon Says Stamp, just a very small sentiment in the lower right, just something subtle. I'll put some tape runner on the back and adhere it to a card base, just A2 size Nina Solar White. And now I want to make sure that everything's sticking. So you can see I'm going to touch all the petals and make sure everything's securely in place. And I cannot believe how well this sticks with just a little bit of glue on the center of each flower. I'm going to finish these flowers off with some detail in the center. This is liquid pearls. This is white opal. And I have to work vertically because mine are really old, so they're kind of sticky. So I have to kind of go up and down to make sure that it doesn't kind of string off to the side. And I'm put that in the center of the red ones, and then I'll take some black enamel accents and add some black to the middle of the yellows and the light pinks. And then once that opal dries, I'm going to add some black on top of it just to kind of match it with the other flowers a little bit more. But I did want them to be a little bit different. All right, so now I'm going to trim off those petals that are hanging off the edge. And that is the card for today. So a really easy way to get some realistic, beautiful flowers that look so dimensional. I love the way this came out. So I hope you enjoyed that, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.